Okay, so one of the next steps in our survey data collection method is to actually design the instrument. So now we're going to talk about how to design questions for a survey, or at least what are some different ways you can do that, and what are some other things to think about in survey research. So there are different types of questions on a survey. One type is called closed-ended. And what closed-ended means is that you don't allow the respondent to come up with their own response. You give them the response categories that you want them to choose from. So examples of closed-ended questions include multiple choice, include true-false type questions, include rating scales. These rating scales can be it's much simpler to code closed-ended questions for data analysis. We'll talk about coding in a second. Essentially, coding just means assigning a quantitative value to a response choice. For instance, in this case, these are the selections. What frequency does an instructor do these things? This is an example of closed-ended question. Used a variety of teaching methods to help the student to learn. And these are the choices. And this is an infamous bubble sheet. And the student has to rate how frequently the instructor does these things. Encouraged and was available for out-of-classroom interaction. Explained and organized course material clearly and in a way that was easily understood. And a student can fill in these bubbles. Well, when it comes to coding these response categories for data analysis, we assign numerical values to them. And for instance, logically, we could assign don't know as 0, never as a 1, rarely as a 2, sometimes as a 3, often as a 4, and always as a 5. And what I like to do for intuitive reasons is any type of scale like this that might indicate more or less of something, I like to make sure that I code the thing that's more with the higher number, like always is number 5, as opposed to always being coded a 1. With this type of rating scale, how are these variables measured? Are they nominal, ordinal, interval, or ratio? Well, they're not numerical, so they're definitely categorical response categories. And they can be ordered. So these are categories, and they can be ordered from less to more. So the level of measurement for this scale is ordinal. These are closed-ended questions. There's no other options here for the respondent to say something crazy or something other than what we have allowed. So in contrast to a closed-ended question, there are also open-ended questions. And here, these are some examples of open-ended questions. The sky's the limit on these open-ended questions. The respondent can answer it any way they want to, with as many words as they want to. Sometimes, though, if it's, for instance, a web-based survey, we will limit the number of characters that a person can type for an open-ended question. But when we ask questions that are open-ended like this, they are stated in such a way, or they are asked in such a way as to try to elicit more of a response, more information from the respondent. The responses are individualized. The disadvantage of these is that sometimes they can be difficult to interpret. Different respondents, if you have 100 different people taking this survey, you could have 100 different responses that are very different. And that sometimes makes data analysis very difficult because of the coding aspect. You may not get what you're looking for either, because these 100 different people could interpret the question in 100 different ways. This concept of what's most useful to you. Well, here we're telling them what was the useful information, but they could interpret that in different ways. Somebody could say, well, the most useful information I learned was the definitions of closed-ended and open-ended survey instrument design. Somebody else could say the most useful information I received was where the bathrooms are. And that's probably, those are two very different types of responses, and it may not be what the researcher is looking for. But they're open-ended. The respondent can write in here or type in here whatever comes to their mind. Some other examples of types of questions. You can have both closed-ended and open-ended questions on the same survey, or even within the same question. This question is, what of the following is your primary educational goal for attending the college? And we are providing several responses for them. We want them to only select one, and we tell them that here. Select only one. Sometimes you have to give those extra instructions, even though we said, what is your primary goal for attending the college? We still tell them to select only one. So these are all closed-ended. This is closed-ended all the way down. We are providing the responses for them, except when you get down here to other. I could select other. And so if I select other, I'm asking the respondent to give me what their response is. Since one of these did not cover what they believe their primary educational goal is for attending the college, I want to give them the option of saying something that they believe is their goal. Oftentimes, we'll receive responses on something like this, and CEUs, let's say this is one example. Somebody might say, well, I was just here to get continuing education credits, or CEUs, for my work. And sometimes they'll make a response here, and in the data analysis, I'll kind of lump it into a category like this one. If somebody is earning continuing education credits, I might, as the researcher, lump that in with to learn skills to advance in the job. So I might actually recode this response into this response during the data analysis part. But this is an example of mixing closed-ended with open-ended. Okay, some other situations that you run into with survey design are one concept is routing. You route the respondent through certain questions that you want them to answer or not answer based on their responses to previous questions. And so this is an example of routing. It's harder to do this in a paper copy type survey, or a survey that the person is going to see, because you have to ask kind of these if statements. If you said this, then can you answer this question? So in this case, we are asking somebody if they're employed, if they're on active duty in the military, or if they're in an apprenticeship program. And basically, if they selected yes up here, if employed, please continue with question 8. So if they selected yes, we're routing them to question 8, which is fine. It's the very next question in the survey. But if they answered no up here, I'm not employed. If not employed, please continue with question 11. So we're actually asking that we're routing them around question 8, 9, and 10 to question 11. That's an example of routing. They don't need to answer this question. If employed, are you employed in a field related to your major? If employed, where are you employed? Well, they're not employed, so we're not going to bother them with answering those questions. This ends this part of the module's presentation. Please move on to review the next part